I was flipping through a book from the 90s the other day, and I noticed something strange. The pages were yellow, brittle, and falling apart. Meanwhile, I recently watched a video of a guy casually flipping through like a 500-year-old Bible, and it was in better condition than this book that I had that was only 30 years old. That got me thinking, why has paper quality gotten so much worse? And is it a coincidence? Or is there something bigger going on? Historically, high-quality books were made from hemp, cotton, and even animal skinning, like linen or parchment. Hemp paper, in particular, is acid-free, it's durable, it lasts for centuries, and it just doesn't degrade like modern paper. But our modern books, they're made with this wood pulp that's acidic, it breaks down quickly, turning yellow and brittle within just decades. This is why I recently saw that guy casually flipping through a 500-year-old Bible made of linen, and it was in better condition than that book I had from the 90s.
First edition King James, 1611. There's only a few hundred of these in the world, but and it had the Apocrypha in there. But you see, that's made out of linen. It's not fragile. It's not like that wood pulp paper that has acid in it. So, first edition King James also weighs about 30 pounds.
And it's not just linen that lasts. In a recent Joe Rogan podcast, Wesley Huff talked about a Bible that was commissioned by Constantine from the 4th century.
Between 313 and 325, Constantine converts. And so he becomes friendly to Christians. He also, he commissions books of the Bible to be written. And so this is where we first get our understanding. Like when we think of a Bible, we think of it as like in a single bound volume. Like because we have the 66 books of the Bible and, you know, has a nice cover on the page and or on the front. But in the ancient world, those existed independently. So like P52, like that would be a separate copy of the Gospel of John. And that's what it would have been understood as scripture. While Constantine, as like a peace offering, commissions all of these documents to be brought together and published in one book. And so we actually have what we think are some of these documents. So when I was talking with Billy Carson, he brought up the Sinai Bible, Codex Sinaiticus. Codex Sinaiticus is probably one of these documents that Constantine commissioned because it's one of our earliest examples of a cover-to-cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible. And it comes from the 4th century. And based on both its dating and based on the fact that this would have been incredibly expensive to make. Like it took 360 sheep just to put together.
Wow.
Which would have been the equivalent of like, I don't know, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars today. So the reason why we're pretty sure that documents like Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus, potentially even Codex Alexandrinus or Codex Washingtonianus are documents that could have been part of this commissioning is just because they're such giant projects. In, you know, very few people would have had the ability to produce something like this other than an emperor. And so we actually have some of these documents that survive today.
Now, as you just heard Wes say, this wasn't just any book. It was a political statement, a peace offering to Christians, and it was made using an insane amount of sheep parchment, a material so expensive that it would have cost a fortune. And yet here we are, nearly 1,700 years later, and that book still exists. Meanwhile, modern books barely last a few decades before they start crumbling. But if we want an even older example, let's talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the most important biblical discoveries of all time. These scrolls contain some of the oldest known copies of the Bible, dating back over 2,000 years old, and yet they survive because they were written on parchment, like animal skin, instead of our acidic wood pulp paper that we use today. Just think about that. A book made of animal skin survived for 2 millennia in caves, yet modern books barely last a few decades on a bookshelf. If that doesn't prove how bad our current bookmaking process is, I really don't know what does. So last week I was listening to Richard Grove's old sit-down interview with John Taylor Gatto when I came across this very interesting clip.
You're observing that values have changed since the time of our founding fathers who were literate, autonomous, entrepreneurial. They also grew hemp. They knew the value of hemp.
George wrote he did it for medicinal purposes, so I assume it wasn't.
And Jefferson traveled the planet collecting different strains, and they had contests, and they wrote letters about their, hey, I grown this strain, and it does this, and they're like competing. And so the fact that you're not taught about this in school, and the role that hemp played in making the sails and the clothing and everything was hemp dependent.
It's a miraculous fiber. There are some rather sober accounts of the lengths to which the Hearst family went because they were the largest forest owners in the country. They supplied the wood pulp for newspapers, but hemp newspapers are infinitely superior to wood pulp, so that they moved heaven and earth to create the narrative of reefer madness.
So if we're using wood pulp paper to make books these days, we're not only killing trees, which eat CO2 and produce oxygen to make paper towels and toilet paper and all these other things beyond books, but I noticed that a lot of the books that are printed recently, the pages are disintegrating. And when you get old books from the 1800s, 1700s that are printed on hemp paper, they're still pretty, existent. We have a Johnson's dictionary from 1848. And it's not printed on the same wood pulp acid, paper that we have today. So can you comment on, they undermine education, but they're also undermining just our ability to get our hands on the books to educate ourselves, closing libraries and using types of paper that, basically turn to dust.
Oh, yes.
So as you can see, this decline in paper quality, it didn't just happen by accident. In the early 20th century, William Randolph Hearst, a powerful newspaper tycoon, had a vested interest in the wood pulp industry. Around the same time, he was also leading a massive propaganda campaign against hemp, labeling it as a dangerous drug. His smear campaign, along with government regulations, helped to push the hemp industry out of the market, forcing the world, us, to rely on this inferior, fast-decaying wood pulp paper. Many people remember this time period for this very over-the-top propaganda film as Reefer Madness. And I originally thought that Hearst personally backed this film, so I picked up a copy from the local library, Reefer Madness.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance, innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. In this film, you will see the ease with which this vicious plant can be grown in your neighbor's yard, rolled into harmless-looking cigarettes, hidden in an innocent shoe or watch case. In this startling film, you will see dopesters lure children to destruction.
We're going over to Joe's place. Why don't you come along? We have a date to play a set of doubles. Oh, you can play anytime. Come on, we'll have some laughs. Can I go along with you? Sure. Hey, I'll see you at dinner, sis.
If you want a good smoke, try one of these.
You will meet Bill, who once took pride in his strong will as he takes the first step toward enslavement.
Of course, if you're afraid.
Smoking the soul-destroying reefer, they find a moment's pleasure, but at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide. And the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important film now, before it is too late.
This turned out not to be the case, but the film was a later product of his original propaganda campaign that Hearst obviously played a leading role in. Another fun fact about William Randolph Hearst is that you can actually go and visit his house, and it's amazing. Here's some pictures of me visiting Hearst Castle like 10 years ago. Okay, so I think these photos are taken from 2013, so we're probably looking at iPhone 4 quality photos right here. But I took these photos, so I think it's pretty cool. This is Hearst Castle. It's huge. Just want to take a little walk down memory lane here. Here's another view of the outside of the castle. As you can see, it's overlooking the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. That's my wife there. Yeah, there's another view of the ocean. I believe actually, so when you come up to the castle, I think you go up this hill, and I think back in the day, Hearst had zoo animals roaming the grounds of the property. Outdoor pool overlooking the ocean. Another view of the outdoor pool. There's the indoor pool. I just thought this was interesting. The opulence is just over the top. This is like a marble ladder to get out of the pool. Who does that? This is the dining hall. It looks like it's straight out of Hogwarts. Just the details. I mean, it's everywhere. Everything is just incredible. I mean, look at the ceiling. This is a library. And I remember an interesting point about this is they've got all these fancy vases up on top of the bookshelves. And because of earthquakes, he had them on, they're sitting on sand. So if there is an earthquake, the vases don't fall off the bookshelves. I remember that from the tour. And then here's a photo I just found off Google so you can see the expanse of the property. So yeah, this guy had a lot of money, and as a consequence, he had a lot of influence. So now we have books that self-destruct in about a century, meaning that if no one preserves them, they're gone. This made me think of Fahrenheit 451, where the government literally burns books to erase history. But in reality, you don't even need to burn the books. They're designed to fall apart on their own. It's almost as if modern books have an expiration date, which makes for a terrible way of preserving knowledge long term. So this obviously isn't the first time in history that crucial records have been lost, making it impossible to verify them in the past. In fact, one of the most important examples comes from the Bible itself. In the Gospel of Matthew, the author makes the case for Jesus being the Messiah by tracing his lineage back to both King David and Aaron. This was critical because Jewish prophecy required the Messiah to come from David's lineage. But here's where it gets really interesting. According to the Jewish historian Josephus, Jesus was the last publicly verifiable messianic claim before the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. And why does this matter, you might ask? Because when the Romans destroyed the temple, they also destroyed the genealogical records that were kept there. Meaning from that point forward, no one could ever make a verifiable claim to be the Messiah again. This is what happens when records, whether written, digital, or even biological, are lost. It doesn't just erase information, it erases our ability to prove what was once true. So if books aren't physically preserved, where do people turn? Digital books. The problem is you don't really own digital books. With Kindle and DRM, digital rights management, ebooks, companies like Amazon can edit, replace, and even delete books from your library without your consent. This isn't speculation, it's already happened. Amazon deleted copies of 1984 of all books off of people's Kindles back in 2009 due to a licensing issue. If history is rewritten in digital books and physical books are too fragile to survive long term, where does that leave us? Now, I know what you're probably thinking. If modern books are falling apart faster than ever, is there even a point in owning them? And the answer is yeah, because even a fragile, degrading book is better than a book that can be rewritten or erased at the push of a button. The key is to be intentional. Build a personal library. If you can, seek out first editions or archival quality copies. Store them properly. And if you really care about preserving certain texts, don't just assume that they're always going to be available. print them out for yourself. Because if books are gone, they're gone. And history becomes whatever the people in charge say it is. So next time you're thinking about getting rid of your physical books because everything's online anyways, maybe think twice. Because if we let books degrade, go out of print, or become purely digital, history itself becomes editable. And that's a problem.